Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Microsoft Partner Showcase. I'm Brian Hitney, Solution Architect focused on data and analytics, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Chris Mitchell, who's also a Solution Architect focused on data and analytics. Now, today, Keshav Polapalli from MAQ Software rejoins us to talk about another solution they're working on in the Power BI space. This one is focused on Power BI load testing. So to talk a little bit more about this and introduce it, Chris, I'll throw it over to you, and then we'll get into the specifics.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. One of the things that I frequently run into when I'm working with partners on implementing Power BI solutions is that age-old question of how much capacity do I need to buy, right? Given the capacity that I'm currently running at, how many concurrent users can I hold? And then how do I, predict and size my application based on my expected load? And often at times that's a really tough conversation, because it's, well, what's your user behavior going to be? And it involves, a lot of simulation tools that don't exist. So it's pretty exciting to have this new capability from MAQ Software. And I'd love to hand it over to Keshav and talk a little bit more about it.
Thank you, Brian and Chris, for having me on your podcast again. Today, I have a very special solution that I wanted to show, which actually has evolved based on our work with a lot of ISVs and enterprise customers we've been working on. And as you covered, it's very, very difficult today to look at user patterns at scale. You may be able to do it with few users, but the minute you want to scale this to hundreds of users, there is no way to mimic the experience, the impact on the capacity, and the end user experience. Generally, if I look at some of the challenges that we have when we talk about load testing, it takes a lot of time. It's very manual today to use PowerShell scripts and very dependent on the hardware of the individual user as well. It gives inconsistent results because you'll have to literally use a stopwatch to look at how much time it actually took to load all the reports. It doesn't scale. The best I was able to do was assemble a team of 30, 35 people to do a load test. Anything beyond that becomes very difficult for us. And then it's very inaccurate. Because of caching, because of network issues, because of throttling, it becomes very difficult to identify what is causing the latency and or the time it takes for the reports to load. Keeping these issues in mind, we created a very simple, intuitive, UI-based application to solve the whole load testing and concurrent testing issue. It's pretty easy to use. It's a completely automated solution that you can just configure and run and get your results. It has very detailed at user level stats that it captures. And we have ability to scale this to many users. I think the max we have tested is 1,000, but you could go beyond that. And then it has a very cool feature where it allows you to select user action, and it repeats those actions and captures the statistics as part of that.
That's pretty cool, because one of the common challenges that I get asked about is, oh, okay, well, I want to simulate n number of users, and then you start talking about, oh, okay, well, what are the roles of these users? And each user's role might cause different behavior. You're going to have some people that just look at high-level reports. You're going to have some people that spend a lot of time digging into details. So being able to kind of emulate and simulate different user behaviors is pretty powerful.
Absolutely. And we've already tried and set this up with a couple of our customers, and we are seeing really positive results from that standpoint.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, so how many other things do you want to tell us from an overview standpoint? Because I'd love to see this in action too.
Why don't I switch to the demo?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let me open my browser. And this is the experience that you would see once you install the solution from Marketplace. I have those steps later in the presentation. It's very easy. You need to go select your report that you want to load test. These are all the workspaces I have access to. I pick my workspace, gives me a list of all the reports that are available there. I pick a specific report. Let's do this. I need to add number of users I want to test this with. I could do 15 or more. I have ability to track at a visual level. If you are looking to see which visuals are loading fast or slow because of concurrency, you can enable this. and just hit trigger. So this is a way where you can get to the load test and its results at a page level. So this by default loads your uh, specific page and shares the stats for you. So however you save this, and this is how typically the end user experience would be, right? You publish a report or an app, you share with end users, they open it. This is the experience that they'll have. This is the initial load. And then here you could see that the solution has completed testing because we are running this test in parallel. This was the one that I just executed. And you could see this report has loaded at an average of 5 seconds, 90th percentile being 7 seconds with number of concurrent users over here. Now, if I want to extend this to capture user actions as well, I'll go back to the report. I'll select the report I have. Maybe I'll pick a different report this time. And we have given this report link. When I open this, this gives me ability to track my users specific. Oops, I will probably switch this to a different report. And a typical dashboard or a report would look like this with multiple tabs. I go in, I pick, let's say, a filter, pick 2020. I pick a country here, state Canada. I pick a category, let's say clothing. Now I have captured my 3 actions here. Again, I can define the number of users I want to load this with. Let's do 40 users. And I want to track at each visual level, and I initiate a trigger. And as soon as I do this, this will take me back to the home page. And in the home page, this will start tracking my load test. So my user actions are tracked under user action section here. When I go there, this was the actions that I have done: year selected, country selected, category selected, and it will give me for each of the action how much time it took and what was the load time for 40 users. It will take a little bit of time because I have 3 different actions and executing for 40 users. And it has already initiated. And once this gets executed, you should be able to see the results as well.
Very cool.
So
while that's running, I had a question about one of the things that you mentioned was being able to, and I think I even see the details on the end here, that you were capturing metrics and visual loading and so forth like that. What kind of reporting do you offer as a result of this load test so that users can look at it and make some determinations on whether or not the capacity is sufficient and what kind of corrective actions it could take?
Got it.
Yeah.
So there are 2 types of reports. One is a summary that we are sharing here. What's my average load and what's my 90th percentile load? Now, if you want more details, you can actually click here and go to the Insights report. This report will capture the data and all the executions that have happened. And over here, you can see that my demo report is selected. In the demo report, I have 6 triggers that have happened so far. I can look at this trigger. So for example, I have sales details page. These are all the visuals that are available on this for 40 users, how much time it took. So this was my user action based report, right? And here is the user action tag. This is something that I just executed. So these are my results for those. I can look at, hey, this is my average load time, my 90th percentile, my 75th percentile. We have some other data. I can actually drill down into much more details of, I want to look at this specific execution for the 40 users, how much time this has taken. And I can switch. I don't want to see 90th percentile. I just want to see 50th percentile. This will give me that. I can set a threshold for myself. As an organization, let's say my threshold is 8 seconds. This will also give me a heat map of how many users took more than the threshold that we have defined. So it's pretty cool. We are still building and enhancing these reports. I think one of the aspects that will come soon, and you'll see that in my roadmap, is we are planning to enable custom row level access as well. where we'll take user input of number of users they want to try. Now, instead of this becoming user 1234, it's going to start showing the GUID or email ID or alias that you would provide that gets triggered as part of the load testing.
So when you say user that you provided, does that mean you could theoretically embed like a Power BI or row level security and so forth as part of the load test as well?
That is correct.
Very
That's
cool.
coming.
Yeah.
That's coming in the next build.
Awesome.
And then the other type of reporting we have overall on this application is the capacity. So you can either click here and go to the capacity to see the stats. The thing is, capacity refresh depends on your users. So I can give a date, start date, end date. And let's say I give a start date of 18th and an end date of 19th. And when I do this open report, this will open my capacity metric app. I need to pick my specific capacity name. And once I do that, and once this loads, it will give me all the data for this capacity. The thing is, there is a dependency on your capacity admin. My capacity admin has this running every 3-4 hours. So I won't get the capacity stats till then, but you can always come back and get to these reports. But eventually, we are giving this capacity report link. So when you click here, this will technically open your capacity metric app with the specific date workspace already selected. So it's much more easier for you to look at the data.
Sure. And so the reason for that latency is just the frequency of how much the capacity analytics process refreshes in the Power BI environment, right?
That's correct. We are trying to use the Fabric capacity metrics app, and your admin can set up the refresh frequency.
Right.
We have it every hour. And I'll get the stats only an hour from now. But basically, this is how it would look like. So if I look at the specific workspace that I had selected and the date, which is today, these are all the executions that happened, how much CU was utilized, how much is my utilization overall, right? This kind of gives me good insight into the overall usage. And then you can at least start making some decisions. There is a next version coming. I'm not going to share soon, but it will have a lot more details and the entire lineage of front-end visual execution to the query that was executed and how much CO it has utilized, but that's work in progress right now.
Cool.
That's great. I mean, I guess one of the things that I like about this is that it allows you to get some insight into what some of the other items in Fabric might be impacting your consumption, right? Because this isn't just about your Power BI reports. Obviously, you're trying to test your load, but there could be other things that you've got going on, ETL pipelines or other things that you might be running that are going to be impacting the performance. So this kind of allows you to get that insight.
Great.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate you showing the demo. It really gives a good overview of the capabilities that you guys are bringing to market. I guess maybe now, do you want to dig into a little bit more details of how the solution works or how it's built?
Yeah, I can jump into how the architecture looks like. I think we've tried to keep it very clean and simple. We've chosen to use service principal for the execution for a couple of reasons. One, I don't need a bunch of, I would say, pro licenses to mimic user experience. Avoid MSA or MFA rather. And the second one is with service principal, there is every session is considered as a new session and there is no caching involved. So it gives me much realistic end user experience. So we're using service principal and we are embedding that into an application to capture all the events, especially the completed events at a visual level for us to track the load times. And behind the scenes, we are mimicking end user experience by spinning up VMs in a Kubernetes cluster and opening the browsers and capturing the load time. So it's pretty straightforward. It's just that it's all automated and put together.
Right, and this is how you scale out in order to hit the number of user concurrency that you're targeting.
That is correct.
Well, right?
That is correct. So as part of your initial setup, it will ask you what is the maximum you would want, and based on that, it sets up the initial configuration. and gives you the room to scale to that many number of concurrent sessions.
Sizes the Kubernetes cluster appropriately to handle that load. Yeah, very cool.
That's correct.
Awesome.
Do you want to talk a little bit about deploying what that looks like?
So the good part is it's a very simple 3-step approach to deploy. There is a little bit of preparation required. As you've seen, you need a service principal. You need to enable some settings in your Azure tenant, especially to download from Marketplace. You have to create an app registration, and there are a few other steps that we have defined in the documentation. Once the base preparation is done, you just need to go find LoadFAST in Azure Marketplace, click on deploy. It will ask you a few questions on the subscription details and capacity details. Fill them. It does the installation. It takes 5 minutes. And then we have configuration. Once it's done, we have to set up and provide some URLs, things like redirect URL for the insights report or your capacity metric app. So a few of those steps need to be done. And typically it takes 30 to 40 minutes end to end if you have the right access and permission.
So this is really good information. What about, since I know this is still fairly early in development, what does the roadmap look like? What are some of the features you're going to be integrating?
We are really excited with the roadmap. First thing we are doing is we are actually getting good feedback from customers on the whole user experience and accessibility portion. So we are working on modernizing our entire look and feel and the way some of these actions would be triggered and displayed. And we are also enabling API-based triggers. So today it's UI only, where you have to go into UI and schedule these. But now we'll allow you to have APIs to configure and trigger. Second one is all around collections. To mimic end user experience, we are in the first version, we have only allowed you to pick one report or a dashboard. In collections, you can pick a bunch of them together and then do a load test on that collection. So it becomes a lot more realistic to the end user load and or end user usage pattern. Third one is row level security. So we will take aliases as input or GUIDs or any identifier as an input, and then execute using those IDs or identifiers. That way, instead of using user 1, user 2, you'll actually see loads for those specific identities. This is one of the most requested feature. This should be available in our next release. We are also tapping into capacity metric app of Fabric to get more details in terms of how the capacity behaves with regards to your overall load test patterns. More to come. I'm not going to share a lot in this one, but there's a lot of work going on in this. Fifth is all about proactive recommendations. We are planning to share stats in terms of recommendations for DAX, recommendations for your data model. We'll be reading the metadata of the data set, and using business rules, we are going to share feedback. So this is really going to not only look at your performance, but also recommend any tweaks and changes to improve performance. Power BI has certain throttling settings if all the requests come from a single region, geography, or an IP. So when you go beyond 100 concurrent sessions, we are seeing some level of throttling happening. We are planning to expand this by adding ability to run this from multiple geos. This not only helps us overcome any throttling, but also helps us get closer to end user experience. We can have a set of users or at least sessions executed from North America. We can pick few from South America, Asia, and look at the actual experience and the load times for those reports. And the last one is Fabric's queue recommendation. We are adding a feature where you can execute the load test for, let's say, an hour or two. It's going to be a step up approach. So every 5-10 minutes, it's going to add additional load. Fabric has smoothing capability, so it's very difficult to just look at a load and say, hey, you're good enough. But rather, if we keep doing a step up, it kind of gives us a lot more realistic stats in terms of how much capacity you need And based on that, we are going to be recommending a SKU for running a concurrency load for X number of hours.
So you'll will you be that? I just want to make sure I understand. In that scenario, will you be running a load and then stepping up the number of users, or will you be changing the size of the capacity that you're running on to kind of zero in on what's the right size capacity for the load that you're anticipating?
We are going to do the first one that you mentioned.
Okay.
We're going to step up.
Okay.
End of the day, I think for Fabric SKU recommendation, we need the total CUs that you
Right.
need, right? It doesn't matter whether you're on F64 or higher or lower. It's all about how many cores you end up using. So we'll try to, we are looking at creating the math around the cores that were used versus what's allocated as part of the capacity and provide recommendation.
Gotcha. So based on the capacity that you're currently running, we're going to step up until we reach the point where performance degrades, and then we'll tell you this is the
Right.
peak concurrent users that you can handle in this capacity. Gotcha.
That is correct.
Okay.
And also
And
look at the overall math of how many cores were used to support that many users,
Okay, cool.
and then recommend your SKU.
Right, because then I guess theoretically, if you wanted to figure out how your solution scales as capacity scales up, you could try it a few different capacity sizes and see, do you scale linearly or do you scale exponentially or logarithmically or whatever. So
That's
cool.
correct.
Very
Yep.
cool.
With that, I could already see, if I'm running large tests, some dollar signs in front of me because of the cost involved in potentially doing that, like infrastructure and so on. So talk a little bit about the pricing and consumption and how that impacts, what
Yeah.
the end user might see.
Well, at least my leadership has guided us to release this on Marketplace at no cost from a licensing standpoint. So it will be free for everybody to download and run this. But there is going to be an infrastructure cost to run this. So we've kind of created some estimates. If you fall under the category of low usage, and I consider low as, let's say, 50 concurrent users, and you're running this test for 20 hours in a month, you may end up spending around $330. If you are an EA customer or have any kind of agreement, then add those discounts to this. Medium customer, around 200 concurrent users for 80 hours in a month, it will cost you around 1,800. If you are a very high usage customer where you have high concurrency tests needed and have to execute for a long duration, like let's say 150 hours a month, it will cost. The cost goes up as there is more and more usage. We are estimating the cost to be around $7,500 per month.
Right. So the moral of the story is it really depends on how much you have to use it for and for how long. I would anticipate in normal, development cycles, there will be a phase where you're doing some load testing where you're trying to figure out how to size the environment appropriately, and then you'll be done. And so this won't be a thing that's an ongoing month over month expense. It's something that you'll spend at a point in time of a project and then be done with the spend. So
exactly. And if you fall under high usage anyways, which means that you have large user base using your application, so you may want to test this for a day or two to see how it's going to impact your capacity.
Right, for sure. Yeah, because it's better to spend a little bit of money up front to find out, what you need to do in order to have a good user experience than have your users start complaining later on, right?
Yes.
So
you definitely need that information, right, as to what's that tipping point, because otherwise you're kind of going blind. You don't want to over provision for resources you're never going to need, but at the same time you really don't want to under provision. So trying to find that sweet spot, I think a tool like this is really invaluable to help find that, and so you know exactly what you can handle in terms of current capacity, but then also if you are anticipating growth to a certain number of users, what would that growth curve look like? What SKU do you need to bump up to in order to support, say, 500 users versus 1,000 users, something else? So I think this is a great way that you can not just figure out your cost now, but then also anticipate what they could be depending on how the growth is over time.
Yeah, help you plan for the future, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So I know that, Keisha, you mentioned this is available today in the Azure Marketplace, so users could right now spin this up and get testing. Any other recommendations for next steps or how to get started? Should we direct people to go to your website to learn more where the documentation is? What do you recommend?
I would say so. They can find the LoadFAST solution in Marketplace. You can just search by the name LoadFAST and you'll get the link to download and documentation, or it's available on our website, MAQsoftware.com. It has very detailed documentation, and I can quickly open both the links. So this is a Marketplace link. And while this is opening, I will also open the documentation link. Okay, so this is the documentation. So we have this prerequisites, a few steps to be deployed. And then once the deployment is done, it has all the steps of where to get this from. And then there are post-deployment steps to basically help with the configuration. And then we've also shared the overall architecture, and we will be adding few additional links here, which will give you more details about the whole application.
Great. Yeah, this is fantastic. Really appreciate you going through all this. I'm looking forward to seeing the roadmap as some of these features get implemented. So it sounds like a pretty exciting an aggressive roadmap to get some of those features in. So really look forward to that. Really look forward to actually seeing the Fabric SKU recommender. That's one of the biggest things that I hear across virtually every customer right now is trying to anticipate Fabric SKU needed. So anyway, anything that touches that and can make predictions is really cool. So thank you for taking the time to share that. Chris, any other thoughts?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you taking the time to share this to us as well. I think it'll meet the needs that I see of a lot of customers and partners that are really trying to figure out what size capacity they need to buy and how much user load they can handle. So I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a great addition to the marketplace.
I am looking forward to be back in hopefully 4 to 6 months and walk you through the whole application with all the features.
Yeah, that
sounds great.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Keisha. Thank you, Chris. Then thank you for watching. Appreciate you tuning in to this episode of the Partner Showcase. And it was great to have Keisha and at MAQ back to talk about their next solution. Hope to see you next time on the next episode of the Microsoft Partner Showcase. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.